In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Tonight, family, we welcome a man whose life work sits at the intersection of discipline, compassion, and transformation. In a world where our schools are struggling to balance structure with humanity, where our young people are searching for guidance, and where leadership is too often reactive instead of visionary, there stands a brother who has dedicated more than 3 decades to showing us what excellence looks like in action. Dr. Robert C. Cooper II is not just an educator, he is a culture builder, a system thinker, a leader forged in the fires of real classrooms, real communities, and real challenges. From the band room to the principal's office, from the alternative education to district leadership, from author to CEO, Dr. Cooper has lived every chapter of the educational experience. Tonight, we explore the man behind the discipline, the scholar behind the systems, and the heart behind the leadership. This is America in Black and White. This is season 4, episode 92, and this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Robert C. Cooper, please.
Good evening.
Hey,
Like
sir, how are
normally,
you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Just one correction, not the principal office, the assistant principal's office.
Okay. Well, is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
I'll speak a little bit about myself, my upbringing. I was brought up as an only child. I have 8 sisters and 2 brothers from both from previous marriages of both my parents. I'm the only child from their union. And my dad was a city bus driver by day and a jazz musician and vocalist, bass player by night. My mom worked several different jobs. She was the ferocious one who motivated me, uh, gave me confidence, and wouldn't allow me to fail. My dad was the wise, soft spoken one who I never wanted to disappoint. And though I had both parents, my work as far as wanting to help young men and also assist young women that are single parents, it doesn't come from a place of I don't know what it's about because I have both parents. It's quite the opposite. During my experiences, both in education and in life, going through school and friends, I saw a need for me to actually have some input and give some advice along those lines.
So, well, as we get into the show, let's start actually, with what I call the reflection on the early influence of letting people get the opportunity to know a whole lot more about you. Can you tell us who was Robert Cooper before the titles, degrees, and leadership roles?
I was a young man that did the bare minimum, to be quite honest, just to make sure my mom wouldn't be quite upset with me. So if I didn't have to study hard and I could get a C, I would do that. Uh, I didn't consider myself to be a bright individual, and it's about the light bulbs. I'll speak on that later on about light bulbs. But I didn't think I was more than an average student. I had really no desire to apply myself, and until I I saw a band in high school. I saw Florida A&M University band, and I wanted to be in that band. And I realized that that was an avenue for me to go to school. And I started to improve my grades. And my mother was She said, you should have been doing this the whole time. And I began to try to get into school, improve my grades, my study habits. I had a background, a structure, if you will, from growing up that I didn't realize until once I got into college. I was, again, like I stated before, I was brought up as an only child. And you get bored playing with toys and being by yourself. So I would read, and I would read what was in the house. And I did have older siblings that didn't live there, but I had a sister that left behind books. She was 13 years older than me. So I had novels in elementary school, Ian Fleming, things like that. And I would read them. I was tired of the elementary school books, and I realized that I loved to read. And I started to collect words. Yeah, I was an avid comic book collector as well, but I collect words like I collect the comic books. And I realized it helped me to write and it helped me to speak. So when I put that forward with my education, I began to see improvements. As I stated before, my dad was a jazz musician, so I always had a love for music. He never pressured me into playing an instrument, but once he saw that I had an interest, he guided me towards saxophone, and I ended up playing. And I ended up playing some gigs with him when I could as a sub for some of the young men that couldn't make the gig that night. So both of the things married, education and my music kind of blended together. Uh, and coming through school, I didn't come into contact with many male figures, and that's still the plight today, whether it be elementary school, high school, or even junior high. I'm old enough to have gone to junior high, not middle school, and I can count how many men that I actually had contact with, in each of those school levels. So one of my favorite, if not my favorite teacher, was Mr. Elvis Pascal, who also played the tenor sax, an alto when needed in my dad's band, the Billy Roll Jazz Orchestra, and he was my band director. And he had quite an impression on me, and I wanted to be a band director, and I wanted to have an impression on young men like he did. So that's what led me into music education. Once I got into music education, I was a band director shortly after graduating. I did elementary school for a little while, and then I immediately got a middle school. And I was doing well, enjoying working with the kids, but standardized testing had become very prominent at that time. And in an effort to make sure these kids met the standards and were able to pass a test, they began what we call double dosing. They would pull them out of their elective courses, and they would give them an additional ELA or reading, an additional math, and the kids were losing their electives. And I just remembered, before I decided to try to get into Florida A&M University, which I did get a music scholarship eventually to attend. Only thing I liked in school was the elective. I loved going to band class, and without that motivation, I wasn't interested in school. That is what I look forward to every day. And when I got to a point where I could have a jazz band and a symphonic band, I had 2 periods of it. I'm like, this is heaven. So when I looked at my kids have that taken away, that's when I kind of switched gears, and I decided to try to move into administration because I felt like from the classroom I couldn't really make any changes. So I thought administratively that would be the route to go.
So, you mentioned that there weren't many male figures as far as school. I guess that means teachers when you was coming along through school. I was just having this conversation with one of my former guests, and what I've noticed is that that there aren't many, but the ones that are there have been so impactful. And just looking back and thinking about hindsight being 2020, what do you think the impact would have been had there been more male school teachers in your presence at that time?
I think it would have been extremely beneficial to our black males. The more men that you come into contact with that are successful or present themselves as being successful, it motivates you. I look at my kids now and I see how I looked at Mr. Pascal, Mr. Pratt, I believe, was my science teacher, and he was the first black Jewish man I ever met in my life, and he had an impact on me as well, the way he carried himself. But when I was at Florida A&M in the educational department, my classes, they taught us to carry yourself a certain way, to dress a certain way, even no matter what position you were in. When I first started, as I stated before, I was an elementary school music teacher, and the school is was basically an outdoor setting. They had the classrooms were in a little square, but in the middle, it was open air. So you would be in the weather, and it's hot in Miami. So I would be sweating, but I had the shirt and tie, and I've kept that for the last 33 years. And the children look at you a little different, and the boys especially look at you a little different. Even to this day, the kids say, "You always dress well, Dr. Cooper. I can see your shirts from a mile away," because I don't like white dress shirts because again I sweat a lot, so I like colors. And I can see how your shoes and your socks always match your shirt, and I ask, leave me alone about my clothes, but I know they're looking, and I know this. I want to be neat. I want to dress well and look the part. So even from that aspect, I think that would have meant a lot. Seeing someone be successful in the school system lets you believe that you can be successful in the school system as well. Guys that went to college, guys that were in fraternities, things of that nature. I wasn't around many of those men, and I didn't realize anything about fraternities, anything until I got to college. So it opens your eyes, opens the students' eyes when they see people that look like them doing things that they never thought of or they even conceived in their mind, and things that are out there that they don't know about. So I think that would have been very beneficial. And that's what I want to impart to my students so they can go out and do the same thing, come back and give. And I talk about that in my book as well.
So as we move along, I want to say
Excuse me.
also to the audience, thank you all for being here with us tonight. And I'm glad that you all are here, and please enjoy the show. So, Dr. Cooper, can you tell us what was your childhood like growing up, and how did it shape your worldview?
I started out in what was originally called Colored Town in Miami. It's now called Overtown. It's not unlike most urban areas where the interstate ran through the neighborhood and basically destroyed a black thriving neighborhood, and it became something different. And like most black families, or any families, to be quite frank, my family wanted to move to a better part of town, uh, and we end up moving to what is now Miami Gardens. When I came, it was Scott Lake Manor, and it was quite a culture shock. I remember being the only two or two one of two black families on the block. I distinctly remember my mother using Christmas decoration, and our house looked like Las Vegas, and all the neighbors' houses didn't have any lights, and I was quite embarrassed. And that's the first time I ran into racism as well, because at that time we had what is known as white flight. A lot of the white neighbors were moving away because blacks were moving in. I actually got a glimpse of a Klan rally when I was about 8 or 9, and I remember that distinctly because we were riding down the street, Zayre's, which is an old department store. I'm aging myself. Most people may not remember that. But they had a rally with horses and sheets on in the Zayre's parking lot. And we passed by, and I was in the front seat next to my mom. It was just my mom and I. And I tried to slide up under the dashboard because I had seen movies and of that nature and what the Klan could do. So I was afraid. And my mom, I never forget, she said, "Boy, if you don't get up, they're not going to do anything to us." So she was tough and resilient. And that was part of my upbringing. You're not better than anyone, but you're just as good. And if you put forth your best effort, you can be as good or better than the people that you're around if you try. And that was part of my upbringing. I watched the neighborhood change, and it became more black. Actually, when I first got to high school, the high school I went to was 60% white, 40% black. I ended up transferring later on, but it was different, and I learned that different is not bad. I learned some things from the students that were white, and I had some friends. Oop, I lost the earpiece. Excuse me. I had some friends, lifelong friends, and it was quite a different experience. And then I ended up going to a much more urban high school, and that was great as well. So I figured I had the best of both worlds. I spoke about my academics, so I struggled, not because I couldn't do it, because I wasn't motivated, and as I stated before, I became motivated. Uh, I ended up having a child in high school, and that's something else I speak of in my book. And my parents were gracious enough to take care of my son until I got out of Florida A&M University, where I was able to take care of myself, and I was blessed, and I thank God for that. And just a loving family, a family that wants to see people succeed, and they want just as much, if not more, for you than they do for themselves. And I think that's something that I take with me that I got from both my parents.
So, so when you think about that, you see the white flight, you see the KKK rallies, you're like, you're getting ready. You're a young man that's coming to, to learn a whole lot more and be more in the world. Did this have any negative effects on you when you looked at other people for this violent behavior and these actions that you didn't quite understand? Did you ask your parents like what was going on and why was this happening?
Absolutely. I had a difficult time getting my brain around why there was so much hatred for people that hadn't done anything to you. And it drove me not away from white people or any other race, but it drove me to want more contact and more knowledge of my people, and find out, what have we done to deserve this? And I found out nothing. And and it made me to want to go to a HBCU, and it made me not want to treat anyone like that, because there are quite a few different ethnic groups that attended Florida A&M, especially our nursing program. We had a lot of students that were non-black, and as a race, I think we are welcoming to everyone. But I had neighbors that were white, and one of them babysat me, so it wasn't a big thing. But I was confused because that neighbor's brother, he was painting swastikas on the sidewalk, but his sister babysat me. So it was confusing for me in junior high school. But what I learned was, sometimes what you see is not what you get, and that works both ways. If you take that approach, or have a philosophy all the white people are bad, you can't go with that. And if someone's treating you well, oh, then they have my best interest. That's not necessarily true either. So it made me cautious, but it didn't make me fearful or hateful. Is the best way that I can put it.
So when you think about then also and you think about now, how do you teach your students to be better about situations like this and how to handle them?
Well, I think social media pushes a different agenda now, and unfortunately, a lot of the children are getting their cues from that. And social media it could be very toxic. But what I like to say, I haven't really experienced a lot of that from my kids. Either way, they're just little pockets of racism, so I don't have to speak on it much. But when I do, I let them know that basically we're not going to treat a person different because of the way they look, their color, even their religion, their dress, because we don't want to be treated that way, and that's something that's learned. If you didn't know that person's color or what have you, and you know what that person's about, the character, you would still be friends with them. If you're judging them just by that, then you have the issue. But I don't have to deal with it that much. Our kids are welcoming. The school that I work at now is maybe 97% black, and we have maybe 1% white, 2% Hispanic, and everybody's the same. They treat each other the same. I've had a few pockets of it, and I've taught across all grade levels, and I've mostly been in urban schools. I've been in alternative schools, but I have been in some schools that have quite a different demographic. Some schools that really had high tax brackets. I would just say, and you know, kids are kids, and I didn't really see it there either, because I just think children are children, and most of what they are receiving that's discriminatory or racist they get from the parents or they get it from social media. You know? Again, I just believe black folks, we're just more welcoming and forgiving. So, my kids, most of my career has been with kids that look like you and I, and they just don't react like that normally. The majority of them, it's very few. It's an anomaly when you have that, and it's usually retaliatory. Somebody said something to them.
So, when did you first realize education would become your life's calling?
Like I said before, Mr. Pascal is my band director, Elvis Pascal. He motivated me to become a band director. And once I got in that seat, there's nothing like the feeling of getting a kid that has never made a sound on the instrument when he comes to you, and when they leave, they're playing well. The look on their faces at what they've accomplished. I've had students earn scholarships and become section leaders and some of the best musicians at Florida A&M. So once I started teaching, immediately I was like, I'm in the right place. And it was so rewarding. Different concerts and marching and parades, the glee on the students' faces. And when they come back or they see you years later, or if I see them in the band in college, the look on their faces, and you started this. Dr. Cooper, you helped me, or Mr. Cooper, if it wasn't because of you. So that really made me stay. But Mr. Pascal, that black male representation, even the way he dressed, I remember him in his dress pants and hard bottom shoes and button up shirt. Uh, he motivated me to want to be an educator, and I wanted to have that impression on the kids that I came in contact with. I wanted some kids to say, "Hey, I want to be like Mr. Cooper, and I want to go that route." And I didn't realize that I wanted to do that until I met him. And once I started doing it, I said, "Hey, man, this is a place for me to be." And then again, the only reason I left is because the kids were being taken out of the program, and that kind of pushed me towards administration.
So, what values did your mother instill in you that still guide your leadership today?
Oh man, my mother was a resilient woman, and she taught me to be resilient, you know, and to believe in yourself, and to not give up. Uh, I once I went the avenue of administration, I got as far as assistant principal, and I was a temporary assistant principal, and I was told, hey, you're gonna get a permanent position, and that's been a while ago. That's been like 13 years ago. My mom passed about 10 years ago.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry.
yes, thank you. But I remember her telling me, you can't be upset and depressed about not getting the position you want. She said, in the position that you're in, do the best you can with that, and be the best you can with that. And I took that as, wherever you are, be there. So I was in the position I was in, do the best and do wonderful things from that perspective, and be who you are. So I got that from her more than anything. Wherever you are, be there, be all in, and be who you are. Be genuine. Do not change. To try to get a position. Like, be genuine, and that's something that she instilled in me, and I use that to this day because I want to be honest. If you have a request for a child, and right now Medina discipline, So I see a lot of my kids at their worst moments. And if you have requests for them, they really don't have an inclination to grant their request unless they know you care. And you have to be genuine in order for them to know that you care. So I found that if I'm genuine with the child, and that's any human being, not only children, if you're genuine, sometimes that involves just listening, especially with our kids. They want to be heard. Even if they're rambling, I let them talk. And I'm genuine and intentional with how I respond to them. Uh, that goes a long way. Then you can get, most likely, not all the time, the response that you want or your request granted. So I want to be totally committed to where I am and what I'm doing, all in. And I want to be genuine. I want to be exactly who I am with the kids. Because children have that meter. They can figure out if you're giving them a story or if you really care, and it goes a long way.
All the educators that's come here have said that exact same thing. They said the kids know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
um, what lessons from your father continue to influence your approach to discipline and structure?
My father, oddly enough, was not the disciplinarian my mom was. And it's a funny story. Uh, my mom, if she got upset, she could have had a PhD in profanity. She might be one of the best cursors I ever met in my life. So I, I as a young man, I picked up on that. And I had that in my back pocket, if you will. And I remember walking our family dog, and I came home and I said, "Mom, the neighbor down the street cursed me. He said some this, that, and if you don't get off my, and that dog can't." I said, "Mom, I didn't say anything back because it's disrespectful, to cuss an adult." My mom said, "If he cusses you again, you give him everything that he gave you." So maybe a day later, he cursed me, and I gave him everything that I had heard my mom say. And when I was done, he was walking behind me to come to my house to speak to my father. And I never forget, my father opened the door, and Mr. J told him, "Your son said X, Y, Z." And my dad looked, and he said, "Unfortunately, he gets that from his mom. Say, I don't curse because I know he curses, and I know my wife curses, and they curse enough for everybody. I don't have to say a thing." So he taught me grace. I never heard my dad say anything but damn, and no matter what situation he was in, no matter how upset he got. And I always strive to have that calm and coolness, which I struggle with today. But he taught me grace, and he never spanked me, but I had so much reverence for him and respect. If I disappointed him, and he would say, "You disappoint me," that would break me all the way down. And my mom was the one that doled out the punishment, and I was fearful. But not that I wanted to disappoint her. It didn't hit the same with my dad when he told me he was disappointed. Whatever I did at that juncture, I didn't do that again because the look in his face, and he was a big guy. I have a little size on me, but he was bigger than me. He's about 6'2" or more, and but he was a gentle giant. I wasn't afraid of him. I never wanted to let him down. So he taught me grace. He said something to me when I was a young adult, and I was complaining that I always say good morning. If I walk past you, if I don't know you, I'm going to say good morning. And I came home and I told I say good morning at work, and these people, some of them don't say good morning, so I'm never saying good morning to them again ever in my life. And he said, "Why would you do that? You did what you're supposed to do. If they didn't reciprocate, if they didn't say good morning, that's on them. Continue doing what you're supposed to do." And it took me a while. I was like, "Man, I'm not," and I understand grace. And that's another thing I talk about, in my book. You got to have grace and patience. Those two things I get from my dad, which it's a constant work in progress. Being in education system over 30 years, going on my 34th, you learn to have patience, but your patience get tried. But grace is something that I really got from my dad, and both my sons, my youngest son,
youngest,
and
the
oldest,
oldest,
they both have grace, and I love that about it, and I impart that from my father.
Oh Lord, well I tell you, they good. Cause I don't know if I got grace enough. That's all. There's a lot of pending situations. I'm sorry, I got to be like your mama. I got to let you know.
Hey, I'm telling you, it's a work in progress. I'm
Yeah.
that's a lot of it's a lot of my mom in me, and it's and sprinklings of my dad. But excuse me, I see a lot of my dad and my two sons, and unfortunately, a lot of my mom and my daughter. My mom and myself, my daughter's like that, but then she regrets it. She regrets it at the end and cries, and I'm like, my mom and I, we go off, but we never cried at the end. So I guess
Okay.
a small portion of my dad that she has in
Um, how did Malcolm X become one of the most influential figures in your life?
her. Oh my goodness. Uh, I guess because of my personality, I was a fiery guy and short tempered coming up. I was bullied early, and once I learned how to defend myself after many losses, then I was that firecracker. And I kind of, when looking at the civil rights movement, I was drawn more to Malcolm than to Martin because I always believed, Malcolm was the guy that wasn't so much for peace. It was, I'm not turning the other cheek. I'm going to, by any means necessary, I'm going to protect myself. I'm not going to allow you to belittle me. But when I read his autobiography, I realized that that wasn't the case with him. That may be how he started, but that's not where he was before his unfortunate death. So it impacted me in the process
Process
of
of
learning to
learning.
become better. He learned some things, and he thought that was the end all to be all. Uh, Elijah Muhammad,
Muhammad,
and once
and
he
once
made his voyage to the Mecca, he realized things were different, and he was willing to change and to adjust, and that is in partnership with being a lifelong learner. I think we make a grave mistake when we think that once we finish school, the learning is over. Life teaches you lessons throughout. I've had people say, once your child graduates from school and you're done raising them, no, they still need to learn and you still need to teach because life is going to teach them lessons and they're not going to be as gracious. It's tough out there. So you never stop learning. And I think I got that more so from his autobiography, which I read maybe 3 or 4 times while I was in school. And it started out oddly enough. I was waiting for a ride, and I'm very impatient. Now I'm working on that grace, and I'm sitting out on the grass like, man, this guy's never going to pick me up. And I just started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. And for years I just would read. Anytime I had to wait, I just read it again. But the fact that he was able to change his views and understand, hey, this wasn't correct, and I need to adjust, and that's okay. Especially in our society right now, the climate right now, you have leaders that double down when they make mistakes. And this guy, he made a mistake following someone who wasn't what he thought he was, and he adjusted. And I think that's how you should go through life. It's not about making mistakes. Everyone needs to make mistakes because that's how you learn. It's what you do after you make a mistake. Do you adjust to be better, or do you continue to make that mistake, or do you double down, or even lie about the mistake? And he was forthright. So that's why he impacted me more so than anything. And he didn't initially. Initially, I was just going with him because I thought he was the tougher of the two. But I learned a lot by reading that autobiography at least 3 or 4 times.
Did you read the Alex Haley version?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I read the first interview in the Playboy magazine, and I went back and read that. And as a young boy, I didn't read the articles in the Playboy magazine. I didn't even know what the articles in there, but I researched that and I went and read that one too because that's the first interview I believe he had with Malcolm in the period in Playboy magazine.
Yeah, you're so right. And that particular, because somebody else tried to write one after Alex, that of
No,
course it
it
don't
didn't pick
didn't
up
hold up.
traction. No, it doesn't hit the same. Not at all.
Right. What parallels do you see between Malcolm's philosophy and your work in schools?
just what I stated a few moments ago. Uh, a lot of time, district policies are not realistic because I believe the people that are making these policies either they weren't in schools teaching at our level long enough, or they've forgotten. But a lot of these mandates that come down, they're not beneficial, and they're not helpful to what we're trying to accomplish in the school system. So I parallel that with Malcolm's first teachings from Elijah Muhammad. He thought that was the way to do it, but it was not. So you have to walk a fine line and be able to satisfy the district, but at the same time, you have to do what's best for your kids. And what's best at one school may not be best at another school because it depends on the demographics, the needs of the children, academically, uh, socioeconomically. So you have to be able to travail those waters as Malcolm did. You know, I got this agenda that I need to follow, but it's not right. I'm just not going to blindly follow that to the detriment of my students. And he did that as far as his religion. I'm not going to follow this to self detriment. I'm going to find out the real essence of what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to follow that. And he was willing to change and adapt. And you have to do that in the school system. There are a lot of leaders, and we have ridiculous mandates and policies handed down, and they go right with it. We got to do that. And I'm like, hey, but that makes no sense. But hey, I have to meet. I understand that. But what you have to do is be able to adapt because you'll lose a lot of your staff if you don't. And the district's not working with your staff. You know, you are. And they need to, know that you have their best interests in mind. So that to me is one of the best parallels, between Malcolm and what I see in the school system.
So I've got a comment here that's in the chat that I would love for you to reply to. This is by, I don't know how to pronounce your first name, Walker, but I'm just gonna say C. Walker. It says, I agree that black people and children are very welcoming, but racist white people kids are indignated to believe what it is their parents have invented in them. I grew up in a sundown town, and people who I thought were my friends in elementary school was not my friends, and it was shown to me by them in elementary school. Even the teachers were not of quality, but quantity, because they too supported the systems in place that was always there to validate racist belief systems.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. I do believe that that's an issue. Uh, and it's become more of an issue with the leadership that we have now. And I've heard, and I'm very supportive. I want to deal with the races that I know that shows me from the gate, because the ones that are veiled, they're much more dangerous. But I on this in my book in the education chapter, because the education chapter does not just encapsulate uh, training, certification, going to school. It's education for us as Black people in America, as far as how we travail these different obstacles placed in front of us with the situation that person is speaking of, how we speak, uh, how we name our kids, as far as being able to have resumes being taken seriously, how we deal with law enforcement, and all these things are unfortunate that we have to bend over backwards, but they're necessary. I speak we have to do to come home alive, especially our Black boys, and because there are a lot of things out there that are set up for us to fail and to not come home. So I speak on how to have your registration, your license nearby, maybe in the middle console, how to respond when the police pull you over, um, and to let's take the stigma off what they call code switching. You're speaking like a white man. No, that's one way to speak English. And the English doesn't have a color on it. You're either speaking it correctly or you're not. And when people say they don't code switch, they're lying. I don't speak the same at home as I do when I'm working. I don't speak to my students the same way I speak to my child, even though all of my children are adults. But these are things that we have to get away from, the stigmatism of that. But She's he or she. I didn't get the first name. I can't recall. But Walker is correct. I didn't experience the sundown town. I experienced some of that in my travels when I was in a band at Florida A&M, and we would go through towns and things of that nature. But I never really experienced that where I was living, and when I was in school at Florida A&M, it was a cocoon type atmosphere. When I went looking for a job, I did experience that. I was far off campus, and that kind of led me to say that you need to stay behind over here on FAMU side of town because I did experience a lady basically used the N word while I was right there waiting to be interviewed, and I was
Wow.
it was a private social club, and I was waiting to be seen. I caught the bus out there, and I walked a while on the little clay road to get to it, but I needed a job, and I had bartending certification. I bartended in Miami a little bit, so I said, "Well, I'll do this at school." And while I was sitting there, they were talking about, and it just so happened to be my high school, and the mascot is the Red Raiders, and they were saying, "Yeah, they call them the Black Raiders now. All the niggers that go there," and I was like, "Whoa." I'm sitting right here. I'm sitting right. I didn't say that, but I said, okay, I'm sitting right here, and they don't care. I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do this interview, and I can't remember if I left before the interview, but I know I got out of there quickly, and that kind of cemented that racism was still alive and well because I had become accustomed to just being around black folks at FAMU. I stayed on that side of town, and those people they took care of me. It was family. But yeah, it's still out there, and unfortunately, with our leadership, it's being pushed and propagated by folks to the kids, and it's a lesson that's taught, and it's hard to unteach. It's easy to destroy. It's hard to build up. Very difficult.
You know, before I move on, what she meant, he or she mentioned, I just know C. Walker. I just want to say that I just like yourself, I've never experienced a sundown town, but I knew what they were, and a lot of times in my travels, I knew where they were. And so if I had to go through places like that, I always made sure this is
Avoid.
my right hand to God. I made sure I got through those places because I know them people don't know me from Adam's house cat. They hate me. And if I was to stop in a place like that, there's no telling what I would experience. But I think what makes this so prominent today that it still goes on is that there are a lot of people, especially those that look like you and I, that have not experienced that. But when some people that experience that and they mention it, you have people that harp on this like, oh, you're just saying this, you're just using this, you're trying to create this, that, and the other, which means they're like totally not thinking about or caring at least at all about these people's experience, and they're like just disregarding it. And so I think when we start doing that, especially to each other, when we do the devaluation, this thing kind of like continues in so many different ways that it spreads more like a cancer than we believe, because the tentacles just start taking off, you know, and people find themselves doing it all the time. And a lot of times, just like the folk that are leading the country today, they start sounding just like those folk, unbeknownst to them, that it's like, oh, it's just should be this way and this is the way it is. But we all have to be empathetic and sympathetic for everybody, because if we don't know that experience, we can't speak on it like that, you know. But
Right.
I kind of hate to hear that that whomever Walker is had to go through something like that. And when you're in a sundown town, I can just imagine what life was like. I can just imagine, because that could not have been anything good at all.
You know, I
Um,
I was a fan of rapper Lil Wayne. I
um,
love his delivery and his wordplay. Uh, I had to back away from him because I remember in the midst of Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd incident, he was interviewed and they asked him about that, and he said he doesn't support Black Lives Matter because his experience, and his experience, a white man saved his life. And I just remember saying how insensitive that was, because your experience is not everyone's experience. And then you cannot generalize and say, well, it's not like that for everyone, because it's not like that for me. That's an individualized experience, and you have to respect others. And for him to say that, it just threw me. And I love him as an artist, but I just I couldn't listen to him anymore after that, because of what you just said. And once you water it down, and it hurts us as a people when you do that. You know, if one black man is discriminated against, or anybody in the LGBT, I can't say all the letters, community, I always say the next one is me. I can't be discriminatory against anyone, because there goes me. And if you're not looking out for everyone, then you're going to become that person that you've been,
Real
you
quickly.
know, discriminated against at some point.
And that is, she just put in the chat, is Mrs. Walker.
Mrs. Walker, okay.
So let's move over to you becoming an educator. What drew you to music education as your entry point into teaching?
Uh, Both my dad, well, mostly my dad. Uh, I watched him carry his bass, and he'd come home from work at about 6, and he'll be off about 7:30. And I remember asking him, man, you don't get sleepy? And I remember him always saying, I never get sleepy, son. I get tired, but I don't get sleepy, which all my life I believed. And then I realized he was just telling me something that to get me to stop worrying about him. I'm like, what? You can't be tired and not. But he played, and he did that with so much joy. And once I began playing, especially when I got to high school, I began to have a love for it in junior high school. And you get around like-minded kids that that want to play music. You make lifelong friends. But once I got in high school, and I was in jazz band in high school, and I was able to play solos, I began arranging music. And then saxophone players, we're a different breed. A lot of times they talk about percussion players, saxophone players, they're a whole different breed. And my dad's 14-piece jazz orchestra that he played in, the saxophone players would be absent more than any other section. So they had a need for subs. So I had to try out. I remember playing Harlem Nocturne in Coconut Grove for Billy Rose, a legend in Miami and in Coconut Grove. And he said, okay, we're going to use you whenever the saxophone players can't make a gig. And most musicians will tell you the best thing that you can have is a gig that's like a regular job, because gigs most of the time are far and in between. And my dad had a gig that ran for maybe 5, 6 years at minimum, 5, 6 nights a week. So it was like a regular job. So when I went and played, and everybody on that stage could be my dad, my granddad, and I was playing audience, and I was even more in love. And I say, hey, this is something I want to do. And a lot of the guys that were on the bandstand were band directors. So I was around what would become my peers. And my dad, I found out once I did graduate from Florida A&M that he couldn't read music. My dad played everything by ear. So he had hundreds of tunes in his head, and he was a vocalist. And the bass line, I'm gonna get in my music bag for a moment. The bass line is far removed from the melody, and I never understood a percussionist or a drummer and a bass player singing the vocals always threw me, because what they're doing musically is so far removed from what they're singing. Piano players, yeah, I can go with that. You're playing a melody, counter melody, what have you. But my dad had all these lyrics and all these tunes in his head. And I was amazed when he told me that. And I remember him telling me that. I thought when he told me, it was almost sheepishly like, I can't read. And he asked me to teach him how to read. And I taught him how to read music. And my dad was, mid 60s when I taught him that. And he adversely taught me some things, conversely, I should say. He taught me some things on the bass. And he left us soon after. I think my dad passed in 95. But that's what got me into education. And when I started arranging music, because when I came up, the bands were getting music from different companies and publishers, and they would always be like a year behind. So what was popular right then, we would play it a year later. So I wanted to play what was on the radio then. So I started listening, learn how to play it, and then I would write it, arrange it, and then I would give it to Mr. Pascal, and he was gracious enough to allow the band to play it. He didn't have an ego, and he's like, go ahead, Cooper, teach him, conduct the band." I was like, wow, this is something that I could do, and it motivated me, man. It made me want to become an educator. And again, once I got in, I wanted to change things from a different perspective. And now, I do more with the discipline, and I talk to these kids, and I gain their trust, and that helps me with other fires, preventing them because they feel comfortable talking to me because I'm genuine with them. They say you keep it a buck, doc. I said, okay, but I don't have a buck for you, but I guess I keep it a buck. You know, that means I keep it 100. You're being real with me. So I said, okay, I'll do that. But that's what drew me. And once I got in, I found my niche. You know what I'm saying? You be genuine, you upfront with the kids, and you care for them. And I will say, I've been doing this since my 33rd year. Uh, I saw something on social media when they were talking about, making sure teachers are okay and educators. They say, you have kids that come to you with their problems, and they're with you, maybe 3 years, 4 years, and then they leave. Either they graduate or they leave from middle school to high school, and you don't see those kids again for the rest of your life. And you say, those relationships you build with them, and they're gone. And at some point, you start to feel sad that there's a possibility, and more so than not, that I'm never going to see that individual again. And this year, for some reason, I had that feeling because I had about maybe 13 kids that would come to me at some point of the day during the week, maybe 2, 3 times a week. And I realized maybe half of those kids I'm never going to see again. They may go across the street to the high school, but many of them I'm not going to see again. And I felt a little sad because they talked to me about, their mornings, what their mom did. My sister was so mean to me, and I just let them talk most of the time. And then if they ask for advice, I got that from my dad too. Wait till they ask, and then I would tell them. And this is what I would do, the right thing. But and how do you feel about it? And I realized I'm going to miss those talks. I'm going to miss it. But the next year you get a new batch, but you never forget those connections you made with those kids. So that's why it's really fulfilling when you see them as adults and they come and talk to you. I remember you, Doc, and yeah, you getting so old. Thank you. I appreciate that part. Thank you. But yeah, it's rewarding in that respect.
So, how did being a band director influence your understanding of discipline and teamwork?
Oh, that is an amazing question. I like to compare being a band director with being a coach. And I really love football, basketball as well, but football is my primary. And you have different sides of the ball: defense, offense, special teams, and within those sides of the ball, you even have more subdivision. You got your offensive line, your backs, your receivers. So I say that to say in the band, you have different sections. So I treated it as the same way as a coach would. So when you practice, you don't have your receivers and your offensive linemen doing the same thing. So have your woodwinds over here, you have your brass over here, percussion, and you have your different components, your different pieces practicing. Okay, but you have to oversee all of that, and you have to go in and you're your own offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. I got to go work with the woodwinds, the brass, and you have to teach them to basically be accountable, and you find the leader in that group, and they help you be able to work those sections. And once they work, then you can come back together as a whole, and you can rehearse. Because I was always taught you don't practice when you come to the band room. You rehearse, you practice at home, and that takes discipline. If you come to the band room to practice, you're wasting my time. When I rehearse, we're trying to put everything together from all these different, from the offensive line, defense line, all these different instrumental groups, and we're trying to make it fit. And I'm just dealing with the nuances. The what's going on with my lighting? We're dealing with the crescendos, the dynamics, if you will. But that to me is just like coaching, and it drives with leadership. You have to be a leader. You have to show the kids that you know something about all the different sections. Just I think as a football coach, you got to know about all the different sides of the ball, and you have to be disciplined in your approach, and you have to have people that's in those different sections that are able to lead. You have to be able to delegate, and that is my approach with education. I think a lot of leaders lose that aspect of it with delegation. They want to do it all, and no one can do it all. Uh, I was a saxophone player. I know all of the instruments, but I don't know how to play all of them as well as I do the saxophone. So if I had a trumpet player that was great, I'm going to let him do his thing and teach those students that play the trumpet. And I think in the school system, you have a great math teacher, a science teacher, then you have to allow that person to be a leader and be great and help your building, help your school. And a lot of times we don't do that. When I say we, I'm talking about the leaders because they want to do it all. And on the flip side of that, you can't have those people helping and leading, and then you don't appreciate them, and then you don't reward them as well. And I think that's a great part of leadership. I think the best administrators or leaders are band directors, and I'm biased, and coaches, because they know how to delegate, they know how to break groups down and have them work individually, and then come back together in a team effort to become successful. They have more experience in that than I think any other positions at the school. So I think that was beneficial to me.
Well, here's another hello here in the chat. This is from Anthony McGrew. Hello, Anthony. Thanks for joining the show. We're glad that you're here. Um, what did you learn from working across elementary, middle, middle and high school, and alternative settings? What did you learn from all those different settings?
Well, I learned that middle school has the most development going on out of all four levels, because they're developing physically, intellectually, uh, emotionally. Uh, so you have a lot going on in middle school, and you have to be cognizant of that because those kids are 21 at 12 o'clock and 6 years old at 12:15. They could switch on a dime. So you have to be
Yep.
cognizant of that, and your approach has to be different. Dealing with elementary school, it was more nurturing, in my experience, and I was in a situation where there weren't enough classes for me, so I had to do kindergarten and first grade, and whoa, that's something unto itself dealing with those babies. So I was able to adapt and change my lesson because you're not really, not that you can't, but you're not really doing a lot. I guess with teaching them how to read music at that age, it was one making music fun and sneakingly teaching them some things about music, but it had to be fun for kindergarten and first grade, or you'll lose the whole class. And kindergarten and first grade, that was their teachers' planning, and they in our district they don't get planning like that. Their planning was PE, so those teachers would be gone. So I would be in there with a bunch of 5 year olds and 6 years old, and it scared me to death the first time I did that. But it's much more nurturing, and I realized that and all across all grade levels, your time needs to be spent